"We no longer have room for outdated mindsets like yours," Elaine said, flipping the page without making eye contact. "Strange, considering last week she called me the backbone of the department. This company needs energy, agility, not someone stuck in the old way of doing things," she added, her voice calm. Too calm. "My name is Howard Green. I'm 51 years old, and for the last 16 years, I was the head of client strategy at a firm that used to mean something in the publishing world, before the suits came in, before the buzzwords took over. I didn't land that role by accident. I earned it, relationship by relationship, contract by contract. I was the guy who didn't need fancy CRMs or cold automation. I had something that can't be outsourced. Trust. When a client called at midnight because a shipment was stuck in customs, they didn't dial the company hotline. They called me. When a CEO's mother passed away the week of a major launch, I wrote the condolence letter myself, by hand. It's not glamorous, but that's what real business is made of. People. I remember when I first joined. Our office was still in a strip mall between a laundromat and a dentist's office. We were underfunded, underrecognized, and barely holding on to 3 mid-size accounts. But I saw potential. And over time, I turned those 3 accounts into 30, expanding into markets we hadn't dared to dream of. And yeah, I missed some things along the way. I missed my son's final basketball season. I spent our 15th anniversary in a hotel room with cold takeout, finalizing a deal in Denver. My wife used to joke that I was more married to the business than to her, and some days she wasn't wrong. Still, I believed in what we were building. I believed loyalty mattered. I turned down bigger offers, ones that came with a corner office and a salary 20% higher, because I thought I was part of something durable, something worth building. That's why Elaine's tone didn't sting the way she hoped it would. It didn't sound like rejection. It sounded like a script. A young manager doing exactly what she was told. Cut the expensive legacy. Bring in hungrier talent. The irony, she never once asked how I managed to retain our largest client for 9 years straight. She never saw the email from Marcus Reynolds, CEO of one of our top accounts, thanking me personally for saving a $4.2 million contract last quarter. She just saw numbers on a spreadsheet, a salary that was too high, a leadership style that was too traditional. No warning, no performance review, no plan. Just a closed-door meeting and a printed memo with the words restructuring and cost efficiency sprinkled like salt on a wound. They thought they were letting go of an outdated manager. What they were actually losing was their foundation. I joined back when it was still called Halden & Brooks, before the rebrand, before the downtown office and espresso machine in the break room. Back then, we were just a handful of people trying to survive off smaller contracts in mid-tier cities. The carpets were stained, the printers jammed daily, and every win felt like a miracle. We weren't efficient. We were stubborn, and it worked. The founder, Richard Halden, was tough but fair. He once told me, "Clients don't stay for PowerPoints. Howard, they stay because they believe you'll answer the damn phone." And I did. Every time. In those early years, I wore every hat. Sales, onboarding, billing, even delivery runs when needed. We were a family business, in every sense of the word. If one department slipped, we all felt it. We weren't building a product. We were building reliability. Then came the growth. Bigger clients, bigger deals, bigger expectations. And with it came the people who'd never seen a cold call in their life giving talks about efficiency. Metrics. The first red flag wasn't even red. It was beige. A simple calendar invite I never received. A quarterly strategy meeting I'd helped create suddenly didn't include me. I brushed it off. Then came the new CRM system rollout. I wasn't consulted, despite being the one who'd managed our top accounts for over a decade. I found out about it through an email blast, same as the interns. a system I knew wouldn't work with half our legacy clients. But no one asked. No one cared. Then they moved my desk. It wasn't even a proper conversation. Just a, hey, we're shifting things around to optimize collaboration. I went from the client engagement wing to a back corner near the supply closet next to the guy who organizes printer paper. Still, I smiled. Still, I delivered, and yet the whispers got louder. He's a great guy, but maybe he's stuck in his ways. We need people who get digital fluency. Then one morning, a new hire showed up. Brandon, 27. Sharp suit, sharper jawline, and absolutely no experience with long-cycle B2B sales. His bio on the internal newsletter mentioned TikTok strategy and empathy-based funnels. I was told to train him on client onboarding. 3 weeks later, he was copied on emails I used to get directly. They were already rehearsing my absence. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. They wanted someone louder, cheaper, easier to mold. What they didn't realize was they were quietly cutting out the very person who made the house stand. After the termination, I didn't reply to their follow-up email asking for a smooth knowledge transition. They didn't deserve smooth. They deserved silence. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't need to. 3 weeks later, I got a voicemail from Tracy, one of the junior reps I used to mentor. Her voice shook just enough to tell me what I already knew. The system was cracking. Hey, just wondering if you'd be open to maybe jumping on a call with Brandon. He's having trouble with the renewal cycle for Unified Trust. Unified. Trust. A client I'd handled for 9 straight years without a single complaint. I still had the handwritten thank you card from their COO framed in my home office. I didn't return Tracy's call. A few days later, another message, this time, from Elliot, a mid-level manager who once told me I needed to modernize. Now he was asking if I'd be willing to consult informally for a client escalation. I let it sit unread. You see, I wasn't angry, I was just done. And that's what scared them. They thought I'd push back, maybe even beg. Instead, I disappeared, taking with me every nuance, every back channel, every client workaround they never cared to document. They thought replacing me was a line item. They were about to learn what happens when you cut your anchor loose without checking if the ship can sail. I was sipping coffee on my porch when the message came through. Hope you're well. Would love to catch up. No agenda. Just coffee. J. Myers. It took me a second. Jonathan Myers, former VP of Client Success at a competing firm. We'd crossed paths years ago during a joint pitch in Chicago. He'd since moved on to a high-growth firm in Austin. I replied, "Next week, my treat." We met at a quiet spot near the waterfront. He didn't. Waste time. I heard what happened, Howard. Frankly, I think it was stupid. The way they cut you loose? Short-sighted. I gave him a half-smile and shrugged. Happens. He leaned in. It shouldn't. Look, we've been trying to crack into the Midwest healthcare vertical for over a year. Your name came up multiple times. The way those clients speak about you, I'd be an idiot not to reach out. I didn't say anything. I let the silence hang. He slid a folder across the table. It wasn't an offer, it was a blueprint. Title, scope, budget, team structure. They wanted me to build their entire client architecture from scratch, with autonomy, with equity, and, most importantly, on my terms. Think about it, he said. We're not in a rush, but we know who we're looking for. I didn't need time. I'd already been building a framework in my head, long before the pink slip, but I let a few days pass anyway. Didn't want to look desperate. Meanwhile, the messages from my old company kept piling up, one from Brandon of all people. Would appreciate a quick call, critical issue with renewal logistics, clients asking specifically for you. Another, from HR, Are you available for a short consultation? Happy to discuss compensation. I didn't reply, but I read them, every word, and I remembered how none of them looked me in the eye that last day. Instead, I focused on something else, a blank wall in my new home office. I pinned a single note to it. It read, "Build it better." 2 weeks later, I called Myers. "I'm in, but I want to assemble the team. No interference." "Done," he said. "We trust you." Those 3 words? I hadn't heard them in years, and just like that, the game flipped. Within the first month, I brought over 3 key accounts that left not because of hard selling, but because they called me directly to ask where I'd gone. One of them literally said, "We work with people, not logos. If you're building something, we want in." Brandon's tone changed after that. His latest email was longer, more desperate. Subject line: urgent. Still unread. You see, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was just building something they couldn't imitate, because it wasn't in the manuals. It was in the calls I'd taken at midnight, the contracts I'd salvaged on Christmas Eve, the trust I'd earned one handshake at a time. And now, that trust was moving with me. It started slow. A missed renewal here, a delayed response there. Then it snowballed. Their largest client in the healthcare sector, Midwest Diagnostics, pulled out 2 weeks before Q3 closed. I didn't hear it from them. I heard it from Janet, a procurement manager I'd known for 10 years. She sent me a screenshot of Brandon's apology email. "We value your partnership and are committed to resolving the transition smoothly." The response: "We'll let Howard handle it." More cracks followed, an internal memo leaked. Then a Glassdoor review that read like a warning flare. Leadership doesn't know who actually keeps the business running. By then, I'd already onboarded 4 major accounts into the new platform I was building. Quietly, consistently. Then came the legal threats. A letter from their legal team, full of passive-aggressive phrases like intellectual property, non-solicitation, and post-employment limitations. They claimed I was violating terms of my severance. I sent it to my lawyer, Darren Briggs, a no-nonsense guy I met through a former client. He read it, smirked, and said, "Tell them thanks for confirming how much you mattered." We responded with a 3-sentence email. No violations occurred. All client migrations were client-initiated. Any further correspondence will be treated as harassment. They never replied, but they kept bleeding. One by one, the accounts followed me, not out of revenge, but out of logic. The trust was with me. Always had been. A month later, I saw the headlines. Exec shakeup at former industry leader after Q3 collapse. I didn't feel joy. I didn't need to. It was just predictable. They fired the foundation and expected the walls to hold, and now the ceiling was caving in. It was Eliza from operations who finally broke the silence. She messaged me out of nowhere, Saturday night, 9:47 p.m. "You didn't hear this from me, but you need to see the audit notes from Q2. Things are bad, really, bad." At first, I ignored it. I was busy tweaking an onboarding sequence with my new team. But curiosity has its own gravity. She forwarded a document titled Client Retention Audit. Confidential. Attached were meeting notes, internal Slack screenshots, and an anonymous risk report. Every page confirmed what I had already suspected. They hadn't let me go because of cost. They'd pushed me out because I refused to fake retention. Metrics. Turns out Brandon had been inflating projections for 3 straight quarters, counting pipeline conversations as renewals, marking inactive accounts as pre-engaged. All of it signed off by Elaine under the excuse of aggressive growth culture. One line in the report hit me like a punch. Howard expressed concerns over client churn data, suggested delaying report delivery until true numbers were verified. Recommendation: replace to avoid friction with transformation efforts. That's why they cut me. Not because I was expensive, not because I wasn't agile enough, but because I wouldn't lie. I sat in silence, reading that line again and again. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It just made sense, the missing puzzle piece. Elaine had even labeled me a cultural mismatch. Corporate code for he won't play along. But here's the kicker. The internal compliance team flagged the false reporting weeks after I left. The Q3 board meeting turned into a 3-hour interrogation. The private Slack channel where Brandon joked about massaging the forecast had been archived and subpoenaed. And someone from the board had reached out to Jonathan, asking discreetly if I'd be open to returning in an advisory capacity. I didn't reply, but I printed that line, the one about friction with transformation efforts. I pinned it under the note on my wall, build it better. The irony, they called me outdated, too traditional, not scalable, but I was the one who told the truth. And now, the people who pushed me out were being called into private review panels and SEC discussions. Some were on leave. Others resigned voluntarily. And me? I was sitting in a room with my own logo on the glass door, hiring talent not for how loud. They pitched on Zoom, but for how well they listened. I didn't build fast, I built right. That was the first rule I laid out when we launched the new firm. No vanity metrics, no padded decks, no digital disruption fluff to impress people who'd never met a client face to face. My small team, handpicked. Jasmine, ex-customer success from my old job, one of the sharpest listeners I've ever met. Devin, a quiet genius who rebuilt our back-end systems from the ground up in 4 weeks flat. And Maria, the kind of project manager who could spot a bottleneck before it even existed. None of them had Ivy League MBAs, but they had scars. Battle-tested professionals who'd survived toxic boardrooms and chaotic restructures, people who'd been told, just like I had, that they were too much, too slow, or too experienced. So we started differently. No corner offices, no inflated titles, just client-first structure and a single principle. Earn trust before trying to scale it. Our first few clients didn't care that we were small. In fact, they liked it. You answer the phone, one of them said. That alone makes you rare. We didn't run ads, didn't cold blast LinkedIn. Every new project came through word of mouth, through reputation. 2 months in, we passed our old firm's Q1 retention rate, with 1/5 of the team. And not because we undercut pricing or played dirty, because we delivered. There was something deeply satisfying in the silence. No pressure from investors, no slide decks filled with buzzwords, just work, just results. I started sleeping again. Actually sleeping. Not collapsing into bed at midnight with unread emails still bouncing in my head. My wife noticed the difference. So did my son. We had dinner, real dinner, on a Tuesday. No late Zooms, no checking analytics on my phone. Just us. Talking. Laughing. The first time in years I actually felt present, and for the first time in a long time, I felt respected. Not just by clients or colleagues, but by myself. I didn't need a corporate badge to prove my worth. Didn't need to justify my salary to a spreadsheet. Didn't need a LinkedIn post to validate my value. What I was building now couldn't be stripped by cost efficiency or restructuring, because it wasn't built for the board, it was built for people. The email came from a name I hadn't heard in months. Thomas Langford, board member at my old company. Subject line: exploratory conversation, strategic collaboration. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit for 2 days, just to remind myself that I wasn't who I used to be. The man who'd drop everything for a title, for validation, for approval from a system that never cared. But curiosity eventually won. Turns out, after the internal shakeups, the board had decided to merge with a competitor, a move to regain footing after hemorrhaging clients. But there was a problem. The merger team had no field leadership. No one with actual client credibility. And worse, the two cultures were clashing like oil and water. They wanted me to lead the integration. Not as a figurehead, as the chief transition officer. "We need someone the clients already trust," Langford said over the call. "Someone who's lived both sides." The irony almost made me laugh. "You mean someone you pushed out of the building a few months ago?" He paused. "It was a mistake, and we're trying to correct it." I didn't gloat. I didn't throw it in his face. Just listened, then I gave my terms. Full autonomy over team structure. Non-negotiable. All hiring decisions are mine. Compensation tied to client retention, not slide decks, and I wouldn't report to a CEO. I'd report to the board directly. To his credit, Langford didn't flinch. "We expected that," he said. "You'll have everything you need." I said I'd think about it. Truth is, I already knew the answer, not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed a promotion, but because I finally had the leverage to lead on my terms, without politics, without noise, without the slow rot of empty titles, and maybe, just maybe, I could use their platform to build something that actually worked this time. When I told my team, no one blinked. Jasmine just said, "As long as we don't lose our rhythm, I'm in." So I said yes. But quietly. No press release, no LinkedIn post, no victory lap. Just a calendar invite titled "New Chapter, Transition Strategy." Because this wasn't about returning to power, this was about redefining what power meant. It was raining that morning, not the kind of dramatic storm you see in movies, just a steady drizzle that crept into your collar and stayed with you. Quiet, persistent. I pulled into the same parking garage I used to walk out of with a cardboard box in my hands. Only this time, my access badge opened the executive level. 4th floor. Same floor where I'd been terminated. Now, it was where I'd been asked to rebuild what they'd almost destroyed. The layout hadn't changed much. Glass walls, gray carpet, the hum of forced smiles. But this time, every decision that mattered came through me. No title games. No vanity hires. The integration was underway, and I was setting the pace. Quietly, efficiently. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw her, Elaine. She looked up from her desk, a flicker of recognition, and then her eyes dropped back to her keyboard. No words, no fake smile. I gave her a small nod, not with spite, not with satisfaction, just acknowledgement. She knew. They all did. I didn't need to raise my voice or mark my territory. The very fact that I was back, not just as a returning employee but as the one setting the new terms, said enough. The meeting room was already full. Old colleagues, new recruits, some hesitant, some eager, all of them watching me like they expected a speech. I didn't give one. I just walked to the whiteboard and wrote 5 words. We don't rebuild. We evolve. That was it. No clapping, no hashtags, just heads nodding in silent agreement. I walked out after the meeting to grab a coffee. Past the same elevator I once stood in, escorted out like a security risk. But this time, there was no box. In my hands. Just a badge in my pocket and everything I had built, now, finally, undeniably, mine. I never wanted a statue or a plaque. Legacy, to me, was always about who comes next. So I started something simple. Quiet, off the record. Every Friday afternoon I block an hour on my calendar. No calls, no strategy decks, just one-on-one sessions with the youngest people in the company. New hires, interns, even those still unsure if they belong in this industry. I don't give them advice. I ask questions. What do you care about? What do you actually want to build? because someone once did that for me. Back when I was 24 and scared of getting it wrong. Back when I thought success meant working late enough to impress the wrong people. Now, I teach them what I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be consistent. That's the real legacy. Not the clients, not the contracts, not the name on the door. It's who keeps building after you're gone. I used to think value had to be defended, shouted, justified in meetings, emails, resumes. Now I know better. True value doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be seen, it just stays standing, long after the noise dies down.